This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second part of What If Kid Naruto Was Raised by a Legendary Monk. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
She felt warmth as she made her way back into her dream world. It felt strangely warm to her, but it was nice. As she drew nearer to the warmth, she became aware that she was leaning against someone rather than in her bed, judging from the calm rhythm of her breathing. This realization lasted for a mere 5 seconds, at which point she was hit with a very painful yet familiar sensation. "Fucking hangover," Anko muttered as she glared at the man and pushed away from him. The man was sound asleep on his couch, one arm resting on the armrest and the other behind the backrest, so it had no effect on him. The kunoichi slowly got to her feet and looked around the room. She was aware that she hadn't made it home the night before, but she didn't know what had happened to her after she passed out. Even though she was only a door away, she didn't care for waking up in strange surroundings with someone she had only known for a day after a night of drinking. It made her feel vulnerable. But as far as she could tell, nothing had happened to her. She took one last look at the man before turning the apartment's knob and leaving. She stopped when she saw that he was staring at her idly with one eye open. She was so sick of that look right now, but her thoughts were cut off when she heard Naruto yell, "What the hell?" He did not move to get up when Jado glanced casually over at the door to what she can only assume is his bedroom. She swiftly strode across the apartment to the door upon noticing this. A black fox was staring him in the face and had just greeted him. No, it was a kitsune, not just a fox. When he leapt back, it vanished as fast as he had seen it. He grabbed his shakuho, which was resting against the wall next to the bed, as he frantically glanced around the room. He was so terrified that he missed the open door to the room, but he did notice that someone had gotten close to him. Assuming it was the kitsune, he attacked her because he thought she was a threat. Anko stopped his shakuho and glared down at him. It made him feel much smaller, as though he was just a bug that had to be squashed, to see her gaze down at him. "What's going on here?" he asked, noticing her irritation. The boy used his shakuho to attack her, so he really couldn't blame her. With his shakuho drawn back, he peered around and remarked, "A black-furred kitsune was in here." She couldn't help but notice that it had to be long gone by now as she looked around the empty room. She couldn't figure out how it got in there, unless it had something to do with the kyubi that was sealed inside of him. The kyubi that Yoko saw during the incident when she was 9 years old had red fur, not black. Reflecting on that, she recalled her talk with Jado yesterday regarding the topic of cosmicism he brought up. When she saw the fox, she did feel small and unimportant. A lot of her classmates felt the same way that evening. "This way, Anko.Han," Jado said, passing her 2 pills and a glass of water. She gulped down the glass and swallowed the 2 pills, exclaiming, "Ancient hangover cures." A short while later, she started to feel better. "Morning, Naruto. How are you doing this fine day?" It seemed as though there was nothing wrong with the way he stated that. How could he be so calm? Anko thought to herself as she glared at the man as he stepped past her and knelt down to the young monk's eye level. Naruto, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, had just woken up to find a kitsune next to him. Gazing at the top of the shakuho, the man said, Looks like you are stronger now than yesterday." Following his gaze, Naruto saw that his shakuho had 3 rings now, rather than just 2. "Tell me, what are your thoughts on the forms?" Anko and Naruto were both shocked by his lack of concern for the situation. "You want to talk about those forms?" "There was a kitsune in here," Naruto said, giving the man a suspicious look. Even though Naruto was aware that the man couldn't possibly be aware of his condition, the fact that a kitsune was present at all suggests trouble. Jado smiled and said, "They felt right," obligingly ignoring the boy. "You felt strong. You have the right stuff. I can tell just by looking at both your eyes and your shakuho now." What about the kitsune?" "What kitsune?" "The one that was in here." Jado inclined his head to one side, seemingly attentive to something. Oddly, he acknowledged a few times, as though concurring, before giggling. "Nothing to worry about, he's not going to be bothering you." "What do you mean?" Jado regarded that for a moment, then shrugged. Glancing down, Naruto saw that slime was poking his head out from under his clothes. "Don't worry about it, with that little guy around, you should be just fine. You have very fine partners, kid. They will help and guide you." "So, did you add a ring to my staff?" the person asked, examining the staff and noting how odd it was that it had grown a ring. It could not be completed without the rings snapping on. The man removed the shikuho from his hands and shook his head. No, as you get stronger, more rings show up, he clarified while holding a different staff. It had 5 rings at the top and was longer to fit his frame. He passed it off to Anko and it lost a ring. Didn't Gramps tell you how special your shikuho is? It reacts to your growth. He took the staff back from the kunoichi and held it tenderly, his face full of nostalgia. The maximum number of rings is 5. It signifies that you are a master. You gained a 3rd ring because those forms I shared with you are very special, very powerful. Not everyone can learn it, only those with the right stuff can fully utilize them. You have a Uchiha on your team, right? The boy asked, nodding in confusion at Jado's expression. Returning the staff to the boy, he said, if he used his Dujutsu, his Sharingan, he would be able to copy the forms, but he would never be able to utilize what it actually offers. Well, that is just an example. He might have the right stuff, but it's hard to tell. Anko, who had recovered from her hangover, finally joined the conversation. And what is this right stuff that you're talking about? She asked. The man knows how to cure hangovers, she had to admit. The man regarded this for a moment, then spoke not a word. You know what it is, right? Jado smirked and said, it's a secret. You'll find out eventually, but not today. You both have lots to do, and I still have to take care of unpacking. Before you go though, I'll whip up some breakfast for the both of you. Anko said, maybe another time, I have to get going, and she walked out of the room. After a brief interval, the cousins heard the front door open and then close. I'll see you guys later. Jado turned back to the boy and said, so, what do you say about having ramen for breakfast? Based on his observations, Jado possessed the identical twinkle in his eye that Gramps consistently mentioned whenever ramen was mentioned. He raised his fist in the air and gave a loud nod of agreement. Jado grinned and said, oh, how we have so much in common, as he started preparing a substantial breakfast for the two of them that included at least 5 bowls of ramen each. As they grew closer over the ramen, Naruto and Jado discovered more about one another throughout the dinner. Naruto looked down at the table and said, I like my team Ni-san, but it's very hard to like them at times. Kakashi Sensei is great, but it's just that both of my teammates don't really give me the time of day. Ever since the academy, my ninjutsu skills may not be great, but I know that I'm strong. I easily make up for it with my taijutsu. Jado cut in, your skills will only get better with time. If there is one thing that I've learned in my life, is that the only opinions that you should concern yourself with is your own, your family's, and your friends. Yay, but it doesn't change how I feel though. Jado gave a confused look to the boy and nodded his head. It doesn't, but over time it will get better. So are you excited about participating in the Chunin selection exam? He asked. Didn't Kakashi.Han tell you that he nominated you for it? Oh, he didn't tell you yet, did he? The boy was delighted to hear that his sensei believes he has the potential to advance, but he was also a little annoyed that he didn't find out sooner. He asked how his cousin knew this, though, and was informed that he had attended the meeting the day before, shortly after his day's training session concluded. He was probably going to tell us about it today. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's just an exam to test your abilities and skills as a ninja. You'd probably have to deal with surviving in the wilderness at some point and deal with handling information if I know anything about ninjas at all. Do you have any skills to help you with wilderness survival? Naruto nodded. Nothing really besides the basics that were covered in the academy and what Gramps taught me. The man leaned forward in his chair after a moment of thoughtful leaning back. Naruto nodded, eager to learn. Hey, would you like me to teach you a nifty jutsu that I created? It's really a great boon when dealing with wilderness survival, especially when you're low on supplies. Okay, follow me as I make the signs. Yay, that's it, just mold your chakra into those signs. Finish with this sign and bingo, a cookie. Wow, you're just as fast at learning stuff as I do. When the jutsu was finished, a chocolate chip cookie materialized in Naruto's hand in a puff of smoke. Jado nodded while chewing his cookie. Really? As interesting as this is, it is kind of lame. The man said, the cookie jutsu is all right. I don't know why, but the jutsu summons a cookie from some place that I don't know of. Where did you learn this? I created it myself when I was bored and tried to summon ramen instead. Still can't figure that part out, unfortunately. They both regretted it. How about this, if I can't do it, I'll expect you to do what I couldn't. Of course I'd like to learn it immediately just as I would teach you it. You go it, Ni-san, the young man yelled. Jado's grin turned into a frown and said, Hey Ni-san. Do you mind telling me about your family? Which unnerved Naruto. I was curious because you gave me this scroll and said it was for your own child. The man said, I know, getting to his feet and approaching the coat. He reached inside and withdrew a scroll that, based on Naruto's best estimation, is roughly equivalent in size to the Forbidden Scroll of Seals that Mizuki had him steal several weeks prior. He opened the scroll and looked at each of the seals on the parchment, pausing over one. A very old portrait materialized in Jado's hands in a puff of smoke. He returned to the table and handed the portrait to Naruto, who observed that it was a painted image of Jado standing beside a stunning woman with long white hair and a white wedding kimono. That is both me and my wife Kagero. She was a great woman who had a will unlike anyone that I've ever seen. Though it was only matched by my own. She died one day while I was away doing a job. Someone broke into our home and killed her and took our child. I don't know what happened to our child, but I can only hope that wherever our child is that they have been cared for. As he looked at the picture that was placed in front of the child, he grinned. He concluded with a smirk that perplexed Naruto, saying, though I'll tell you this, if they were still around, my child would have had the right stuff and been able to learn what you're learning. Well, I have to go now, Ni-san, the young monk remarked, returning the portrait before getting to his feet. I'll see y'all later. As the boy approached the door, Jado said, yeah, have a good day. Naruto nodded and walked out of the apartment, saying, if you ever need any help, feel free to give me a holler. Jado took a few moments to sit there and then fixed his gaze on the picture of him and his wife. Naruto couldn't help but think back on what had happened that morning as he strolled through the streets. He is certain that he did not see anything, having seen a kitsune. Even worse, he had a dream in which he saw the same kitsune. That was strange, though, because he can recall the dream almost exactly, including every move made by each form while the kitsune helped. The boy thought that was strange because he had never had a dream like that before. He was so engrossed in his thoughts that he was startled out of them when he passed a red-haired boy who had a big gourd strapped to his back. He simply stopped in the middle of the street without turning around. He had never felt anything like the feeling he got from the boy. Naruto has encountered plenty of spirits and demons, but the boy's energy was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The darkness eventually subsided, and he started walking to the bridge where his team usually met. What transpired that morning was something he was going to tell his grandfather about earlier, but it just made the list now. It was obvious to the monk that he needed to educate himself. He couldn't afford to appear like a mess in front of his teammates, as he had done in Wave Country. He saw that both of his teammates were waiting at the bridge as he got closer. Sakura was standing close to Sasuke, who was leaning against the rail. Based on the monk's observations, Sakura was attempting to woo the Uchiha once more, but it didn't seem like she was successful based on the dejected expression on his face. Good morning, waved the young man. You're running late, Naruto, the kunoichi said, fixing her gaze on the abbot. The Uchiha did not even bother to nod in acknowledgement of Naruto's presence. Just because Kakashi-sensei is always late doesn't mean that you should too. The boy sheepishly scratched the back of his head and then let his hat hang off the back of his neck, saying, sorry, I crashed at my cousin's new place after we partied. Gramps left me there and I had breakfast with him. Ni-san is cool and all, but very weird. You have a cousin? Just found out 2 days ago. He's been traveling the world for a long time before coming to see Gramps. Kakashi-sensei met him after we came back from Wave Country. Even though he was a monk and not as cool as the Uchiha, the monk knew Sakura was somewhat curious to learn about her more open teammate. What is he like? He asked, knowing full well that she would never admit it. He looked thoughtful, trying to recall his interactions with Jado. He seems cool, but a bit weird. When I was over last night, he was still unpacking but had lots of books out. Many that had letters that I couldn't understand. If Sasuke's head tilt was any indication, that intrigued him. He's confusing at times. Remember those taijutsu forms that I was going through? He didn't explain anything about the style aside from the fact that it's supposed to be really powerful. Ni-san was confusing and wouldn't really explain anything about them besides that I have the right stuff and that if his child was still around, they would have had the right stuff as well. That made both of his teammates, Sasuke in particular, more sober. The entire village knew that Sasuke's elder brother, Itachi, had killed his clan. Therefore, Naruto could be somewhat sympathetic to the Uchiha's loss of a family member. Sakura's thoughts, though, strayed elsewhere. He said that you have the right stuff and that if his child would have had the right stuff as well. Yeah, he said that. It sounds like something from a bloodline, the kunoichi said, focusing entirely on the monk. The boy shook his head, but he understood where she was going with this. A bit of a weird one, but I guess that the Hyuga are the same way. Did you ever know about this before? She asked. Odd, I know that with the Hyuga. Anyone can use the Hyuga gentle fist, but only they can really utilize it from having the Byakugan. What do you have to take advantage of it? He shrugged, saying, all I have is the right stuff. I'll have to talk to both Gramps and Ni-san later about this. We're going to be visiting him again later to help him finish settling into his new apartment. The incessantly late Jonin said, I'm going to visit your cousin Naruto, as he materialized in a puff of smoke. Well guys, I don't have much planned for you today. Anyway, I have an announcement to make. Yesterday after our training ended, Hokage Sama was holding a meeting for the upcoming Chunin selection exams. That caught all of the Genin's attentions. I nominated all 3 of you for the exams. So Ni-san wasn't lying earlier? Kakashi scowled slightly behind his mask. Naruto asked, he told you about that, and related what he had heard earlier in the day. Both Naruto and Sakura gulped at that, though Sasuke appeared enthused. Well, he's only half right about what's to be involved. But it's far harsher than what he believes it to be. Although don't let what I say discourage you from taking the exams. You'll be testing with other ninjas from around the world and competing for the opportunity to become Chunin, Kakashi said, maintaining eye contact with both Sakura and Naruto for a short while. Kakashi was staring at him, his head cocked to the side to such an extent that, had Naruto not known any better, he would have thought it had never happened. Naruto was a little miffed about the lack of appreciation for the entire team, but she knew it to be true. Sakura had improved the most, despite not being the strongest. I wouldn't have nominated you guys if I didn't believe in you. Especially you Sakura, you have really shaped up quite a bit since we first started. Out of everyone here, you've improved the most. The monk noticed the enraged look Sasuke shot at the kunoichi and Jonin, as though he was about to object but refrained. Keep in mind that power and strength aren't everything, the Jonin said, surveying the team as a whole. The man reached into his pouch and took out 3 different scrolls. It's a part of it, but you're all still growing. You just left the academy a few months ago. It'll take time to really blossom, and this exam can, how should I say this? Tend to your growth like a gardener tending to his flowers. Here I have a scroll for each of you. Until the day before the exam, I want each of you to train on your own. Each scroll will have details on what I'd like you to work on before the exams begin on the 1st of July. We won't meet until the very start of the exams where I will only see you off. Now take your scrolls and remember that if you need help, seek me out and ask. The genin obeyed, but the man held onto the scroll and gave Naruto a brief look in the eye as he tried to remove it from the jonin. The young blonde felt the scroll in her hand and it felt exactly as heavy as the scroll from the previous day. Kakashi was just wondering if he was deserving of it and thought he was. A sense of pride welled up in him as he studied the closed scroll. It appeared aged, though not as old as Jado's. Sakura called out to the monk, Kakashi. Sensei, grabbing his attention. Her scroll was open. It appeared to be brand new. You want me to work on physical conditioning? The man gave a nod. Yes, of all the things that you need to improve upon Sakura, you need to work out more and increase your chakra reserves. What you do between now and then may not be much, but it's better than nothing. You make that a routine to do and you'll be able to match your teammates at some point. You have the technique, now you just need the strength and stamina. The Uchiha growled, Sensei, this is ridiculous, and closed his own newly looked scrolls. I do not need to work on my forms. They're fine as they. The boy started to roll on, but the Jonin stopped him, saying, no they aren't. If they were then both Naruto and Sakura wouldn't exploit them as often as they do. The Uchiha sighed. Sasuke, you may have a large chakra reserve, a few ninjutsus under your belt, and the Sharingan. It means nothing if you leave yourself open for an enemy to slip in and kill you. The child then became quiet. Kakashi then cast a sidelong glance at Naruto, saying, not everyone will be so nice to just punch you when you make the slip. Not going to open it, Naruto. Taking that as a sign, the boy unrolled the scroll very, very carefully. His gaze flicked over the parchment, then returned to the opening line. A jutsu? The monk inquired while shutting it. With a jealous glance, Sasuke met the Jonin's nod. Out of the three of you, you don't need much aside from gaining experience and learning jutsu, said the man. Sakura and Sasuke were both dismissed by Kakashi, who said, with your massive chakra reserve, you really could use some more jutsu under your belt aside from the Kage Bunshin. The Kunoichi was shot down when she tried to ask him out again. After they had both left, Kakashi turned back to Naruto. He bowed so that he was facing the boy at eye level. Naruto, what I gave you is a jutsu that my own sensei taught me when I was your age. He made it himself and it took him 3 years before he mastered it. Who was he? Namikaze Minato. Naruto thought his grandfather had just struck him over the head with a staff at that precise moment. Looking over the scroll again, he would never have guessed that Kakashi was the Jonin sensei of the Yondaime Hokage, but here it was. The name of the jutsu was at the top, and the man's name was printed in small print directly below that. Sensei, do you really believe that I should have this? The older man ruffled his head and grinned. The boy stiffens at the thought of the man, recalling what the man had done. Yes, I do believe that you should have this. I'm sure that he would have liked you to have it. Sensei would have wanted you to be prepared, and what better way to be prepared than with his own personal jutsu? He said, sealing the Kyuubi no Yoko inside of him at birth. The boy nodded, clearly sensing that a lot of weight was now in his hands. Right now, it felt heavier than Jado's. While his cousin's scroll was intended for his kid who had vanished, this particular scroll was directly from the fabled Namikaze Minato, the greatest Konoha. Born ninja and the one who had vanquished the Kyuubi no Yoko. Whispering, "Thank you, Sensei," Naruto bowed. The man got up and said, "You're welcome, Naruto. Though as great and powerful as it is, the technique isn't even finished yet. It was something that I couldn't do, and neither could Minato. Sensei have pulled off. Maybe you can if you gave it your all." Naruto sighed. With that, the Jonin vanished in a puff of smoke, just as he had appeared. "You can go now. Remember, if you need any help, don't be afraid to ask." He had to decide what to do next, since he saw that as the official end of the meeting. He had the option of returning to his rural home or going back to the town to assist his cousin. Though he was aware that the plan was to go help Jado later, the boy saw this as an opportunity to spend some additional time with his cousin. Yes, he was slightly strange and older than him, but still, it was something. After spending so much time living solely with his grandfather, he never truly knew who his parents were. Karasu had revealed to him that his mother was Uzumaki Kushina, but he was unaware of his father's identity. He realized that maybe his cousin would know who they were. Given that Jado was his cousin, he must have some knowledge of his parents, am I correct? He started heading back to his cousin's place with renewed resolve. He made the seals he had learned that morning, and then a cookie appeared, until his stomach began to growl. The boy mumbled as he chewed his cookie, as strange as it is, it does have its uses. Naruto suddenly found himself facing the door he was familiar with. He gave it a few raps with his knuckles. He waited for his cousin to open the door after hearing movement from inside. He was shocked to see his cousin, who appeared to have just woken up, when the door opened. He muttered as he opened the door, "Damn it, what's with people coming over right when I'm sleeping? Oh Naruto, what's up?" The boy entered the living area through the portal and said, "Kakashi. Sensei gave us the rest of the week of train on our own to prepare for the exams, and I wanted to help you out." Other than finishing the dishes from breakfast, it didn't appear that his cousin accomplished anything. He glanced over the table and saw that the enormous scroll was now resting on it. He ruffled Naruto's hair, much to the boy's chagrin, saying, "Thanks for the offer, Naruto." The boy nodded, pulled out the scroll, and explained what it contained. "If you don't mind me asking, did Kakashi.Han leave you anything to do before the exam?" he asked, clearly moved by the older man's actions even though he knew Kakashi had completed it earlier. Even though the boy wasn't quite ready to work on it, he offered him the couch and went to sit down to examine what was inside the scroll. "Would you like to look it over while I pull out some more stuff?" he asked the boy. "I'll be taking care of the stuff while you work on that, but if you need anything, feel free to ask." For the most part of his stay, Naruto stayed seated on the couch and read the notes left by the man who is widely regarded as the greatest Hokage of all time, while his cousin would periodically move the scroll to a different location in the apartment. The boy occasionally looked up and noticed that it was starting to look more dowdy, but his cousin was nowhere to be found. Looking around, he discovered that he was carrying 2 glasses of water and had come from the kitchen. He accepted the offered glass and took a sip while his cousin took a seat across from him. Looking over the notes, the man said, "So how is it?" Glancing at his cousin, the young monk took the hint and explained, "I remember seeing Pervy Sage use this once in a sparring match with Gramps." Laying the scroll across his lap, "Pervy Sage is my godfather who my mom chose for me should anything happen to her. He stops by from time to time to see we're doing, but that one time, both Gramps and Pervy Sage decided to cut loose. It was really cool to see Gramps in such a highly intense fight. Pervy Sage almost had him a few times and nearly got him with this jutsu. He missed, but he destroyed a boulder in the forest near the temple." Naruto sighed. The Yondaime Hokage created this jutsu, and it took him 3 years to master, according to Kakashi Sensei. His eyes then glowed as he saw a raging sphere of chakra floating above his cousin's hand. What the? How could? The show abruptly ended when Jado clenched his fist. It's really an interesting technique. At this point, shocked, Naruto was babbling and waving his arms, asking, "But how could you do that so fast?" The man looked at his hand and formed another sphere after blinking a few times. He continued the jutsu a few more times while keeping his fist closed. "Naruto, it's not the first time that I did shape manipulation before. Even then, I've mastered my body a long time ago. For me to actually take time and learn something new, it really has to be something brand new or some kind of scholarly pursuit. They really do give me the most pleasure these days. Still, it took the greatest Hokage 3 years to create and master it. And the concepts behind it aren't all that new. They've been around for a very long time." "Yes, but even so," the boy sighed, acknowledging his loss. While admitting he was a little shy to ask, Naruto said, Do you know who my father is?" Jado looked at him bewildered. Raising an eyebrow, his cousin said, "I was wondering if you knew since my mom, Kushina, is your aunt." Naruto saw the expression change. "I thought that you'd know since Gramps doesn't." This time, Jado closed his eyes and sighed. "I'm sorry Naruto, I really don't know. I've been out of touch with the family for a long time, and even then the only one that I've been in touch with has been Gramps." The man then turned to his bookcase. I knew a Kushina before, but it's very unlikely that she was your mother. She was an apprentice of mine many years ago, very bright and very strong, but she was the middle child of the family. Older and younger brothers had everything that their mother had. The older had her dujutsu and chakra while the younger one had her body and will. As per the customs of the society, when Pimiko Sama passed on, her chosen successor had to be one of her sons. Kushina was passed over without a thought. She became bitter towards her brothers who would later end up in a blood feud. He leaned back into the couch while looking at Naruto in the eyes. The boy began to tremble at the thought that Gramps was not his grandfather. "I'm going to be honest with you Naruto, but know that I'm only speculating here. Gramps has never settled down with a woman. He has no kids of his own, he adopts. He's adopted me and most likely your mom too if that Pervy Sage of yours is anything to go by. Though that would make her my sister then, wouldn't it?" After learning the truth from this stranger, Naruto was at a loss for words and felt hollow. But Jado told Naruto that family is more than just blood, drawing the boy near to him and putting him in a headlock. He then gave Naruto a nugget, saying, "It's the bonds we share with each other. He's been there for you and me since day one and he'll always be there for us. One more thing, don't you dare call me uncle. I prefer cousin." The youngster attempted to break free from his cousin's headlock, but it was ineffective until he punched the older man in the stomach. With a gratifying grunt, Naruto released himself from his cousin's hold. "Take that knee-san." The man made another attempt to grab the boy, saying, "Why you lousy no-good rotten brat," only to meet air as Naruto grinned and ran out of the couch. The boy's triumph was short-lived, as something struck him squarely in the eyes. It blew off his face and scattered crumbs all over him and the floor. This means war. As Karasu strolled through Konoha once more, she couldn't help but glance in the direction of the setting sun. He had seen a lot of sights in his life, both beautiful and ugly, but he couldn't help but stare as the sun sank behind the monument. He stood in the street holding a bag of groceries he had purchased for his grandson, and it seemed as though everything else had vanished. The villagers, civilians and ninja alike, were like insects to him at that moment, totally disregarded as he turned to face the 4 village leaders. He never understood why the villagers felt it was necessary to carve their Hokage's faces into the side of the mountain. For the old monk, It seemed as though they had an unusual kind of reverence for them. He considered historical human behavior and concluded, humans are weird. In a few more seconds, the moment passed and he carried on toward his grandson's apartment. When they heard the rings of his shakuho and saw him, people who were heading home shifted out of his way. Not many welcomed him, and even fewer ventured to look him in the eyes, barely understanding what they were witnessing. Even after visiting the village numerous times over the years, he is still in awe of the people's inability to comprehend that he actually travels the same streets as them. While some regard him with disdain for his younger grandson, others see him as a tool to control that same grandson. A monk is the best person to keep them safe from the biju. Even so, since that day a little more than 10 years ago, it hasn't been easy for him in Naruto. He was despised by the populace, and some even made attempts on his and Naruto's lives. Being well liked by the Hyuga Hiyashi and the Sandaime Hokage was helpful, but what ultimately benefited him in Naruto over the years was his capacity to provide assistance when the Fire Temple of the Red Sect was unable to. Villagers would occasionally pay a visit, but usually only when a small demon or trouble making spirit appeared and started causing mischief. The majority of the monks at the Fire Temple were retired ninjas with little formal training in the subject. Instead, they relied on the graces of whichever deity they chose to worship in order to achieve personal enlightenment. It's not that they can't deal with a goblin or spirit. Most of the time, they just don't know how to handle them. He looked around and saw the building, but as he got closer, he saw someone. He greeted her, "Good evening, Anko-chan," as he stood by the front door. "How have you been?" She opened the door and said, "Hey old man, again." Even if he understood the purpose of the exams, it seemed like a ridiculous method to pursue a promotion to say, doing all right. Just a long day with preparing for the exams." He looked at her, thinking, these Chunin selection exams are really foolish. He was aware that she was aware of his personal distaste for exams. He was really concerned about her personal safety when she took the tests, having only just started to help her get over Orochimaru's betrayal. He had directed the funerals of those claimed by the end before she took them. To him, this was just another waste of life where ninjas used this to wage war. He had seen a few of them before she took them. Although his grandson Jado might find it appealing, he would not approve of it. Though the man may not admit it, he enjoys the benefits of war, not what he would consider to be nothing more than an extreme form of combat simulation. It's that time already. She let him in and said, "Yeah, it is, and I have to oversee and make sure that everything is in place because I'm in charge of the second exam." "Hey old man, are those really his eyes?" The elderly man hesitated, not anticipating that inquiry. "Did he show you his eyes?" He thought that was strange because the last time he had seen his eyes, they had never called for such a response. She nodded and shuddered. "I don't know how he can stand those damn eyes, they're just so wrong." "What did he show you exactly?" His eyes were replaced with those of an octopus. He was silent for a little while, then he laughed. "Anko-chan, Jado was just pulling your leg there. He loves illusions, and used them for a greater part of his life. So don't take what he may or may not show you at face value." Sadly, it became a habit of his to place an illusion over his eyes for his own protection from when he was younger, and it just stuck. "He has a dujutsu or something." He shrugged and started to move again, saying, "It's something, and not a dujutsu. If he really trusts you, he might show you what's under the illusion, but let me tell you something first. I'm not sure how many times he's actually showed his eyes to others since the habit is so ingrained that he tends to forget about it most of the time. He might have changed, so I don't really know, but he might hold back for a while because of Naruto." She shut the door behind her and hurried to stand beside him. "Does it have something to do with that style he is showing Naruto? Earlier he said that the kid had the right stuff." Karasu hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Although he was aware of the style, he was taken aback to discover that the boy actually possessed the necessary skills to execute it flawlessly. But, on the other hand, his grandsons should have discussed it among themselves. After reflecting on his response, he started, "You know how Jiraiya Dono is the Toad Sage, right? Very few can become a Toad Sage because the person needs to have a very large chakra reserve. In theory anyone can, but that is only if their will is strong enough to handle the strain of the training. Are you saying that Naruto is undergoing a type of sage training?" The old man started up the stairs, saying, "It's similar to that. Jiraiya Dono's body shows physical changes when he is harnessing the energies used by the Toad Sages. It's similar with what Jado has done, but it's permanent. He most likely doesn't want to frighten the boy either, considering what is going on with his life. She said. Speaking of the kid, he saw a kitsune as soon as he woke up, trailing closely in his wake. Know anything about that one there? She informed him of what had occurred that morning. Was Jado concerned? She asked. They arrived at his destination at that point, and he said, then there's nothing to worry about. Would you like to stay over again for dinner, Anko-chan? I'm sure that he'll do as fine a job as he did the other night. Is this because he's better at cooking than you? She asked, casting a suspicious glance at the elderly monk. A little bit. I'd prefer you having dinner with us tonight, especially when you're literally next door. There is no need to be alone tonight. She gave it some thought. Though she didn't take long to make up her mind, she gave it more time than it really needed. The kunoichi was aware that Jado was indeed a skilled chef, as the monk had claimed, but she was also aware that her apartment would be lonely. At last, she said carelessly as she pushed the door open, just for dinner. With a raised eyebrow, Karasu gave the kunoichi a shoulder shrug. They both came to a stop when they saw the apartment. A few things had been changed, some work had been done, but there were now more books than before and a few more cozy things. The room was furnished with a small work area with what appeared to be journals on top, a portrait hanging from the wall, and a few pictures displayed on a shelf. But what drew their attention were the two apartment residents. Jado and Naruto were seated at the kitchen table, flipping cards and showing them to each other. In the event that someone won an exchange, they took the cards. If two cards matched, they had a toss, up to see who would win the pile. It seemed impossible that they were both staring at each other with such intensity. The cousins refused to even acknowledge the presence of Jado's neighbor and their grandfather. Finally, Karasu asked, "What are you doing?" as he moved to put the bag down in the kitchen area. "War," Jado replied. "How long have you been at it?" "Several hours." Jado nodded, and the elderly monk sighed. "Same game. If you were going to play cards, why that game?" "It's war." Naruto added, "and it's fun," as he put down another card and took possession of Jado's. They matched each other's cards at that point and engaged in a throwdown, exclaiming, "Ha, take that." Jado grabbed the pile that occasion. The man stood up and at last noticed Anko. "Mind taking over, Gramps? I should start dinner soon," he said. She nodded and started scanning the apartment, saying, "Hey, didn't notice you for a moment. Having dinner with us?" She nodded but sat down to watch the elderly man and Naruto play cards. "If you want, you read some of my books Anko.han while I take care of dinner." She watched the two play the game for some time before growing bored. War was the one card game she was certain she detested. If the players aren't fortunate enough, it could end quickly or go on for hours at a time. Observing that it would require some time, she proceeded to the bookshelf and perused the contents. She was unable to read the majority of it, but she was able to read a few, including one whose author she knew. She took that one and settled into the couch. "So when did you pick up Jiraiya Sama's novel, The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Ninja?" The man said, Yesterday before we met for lunch," as he was approaching the kitchen. "I wanted something new to read and it looked interesting. Though I am curious as to why the clerk tried to point me towards his other books. They looked interesting for a romance," the kunoichi grumbled. "Something wrong with them?" "Yay, the man is a well-known pervert and those books are loaded down with smut." "Have you read them?" Anko didn't notice Karasu's shiver or the look his two grandsons gave him as she was reading the book. "Not really, but the books are only sold to those who are 18 or older and it's well known that the man peeps on women at the bathhouses. Besides, knowing the man and knowing the target audience, I'm not too keen on reading it anytime soon. Though I am surprised that he wrote this." According to the clerk, it was his first novel. Though you really shouldn't judge a book by its cover until you start it. Now you got me interested in checking out his other books. "What are you, a pervert?" Anko and Naruto asked the man, their expressions disbelieving. "Ouch, you hurt me again, pretty maiden," the man said, seeming to be in mock agony as he abandoned his plans. "Everyone is a pervert, especially my boss for some odd reason." Asking, "Who is your boss?" Naruto took possession of a stack of cards. At last, he was gaining the upper hand and controlling Karasu. He replied as Jado started up again, a little old man named Kitobi. "Hey Gramps, is that pervy monk?" Jado laughed and Karasu nodded. "Yay, he's a really dirty old monk. You don't know a tenth of it." Ignoring his cousin and Anko's conversation, Naruto said, "Hey Gramps, I have a few questions for you." The boy went on to describe what had happened and how he felt as he passed the red-headed boy on his way to his meeting. I was walking to the meeting place for my team today, and something happened. Well, two things if you count what happened this morning when I woke up. He also provided that description when asked about the boy's distinguishing features. There was a brief pause before Karasu responded. Everything stopped at that moment. That sounds like Sabaku no Gara, the third Jinchuriki of the Ichibi no Shukaku. What, you think that I didn't keep tabs on the Biju? What kind of member of the order do you take me for? They fall under my domain, so it's only natural that I keep an eye on them from time to time. Is it implied that I'm also within your domain? Naruto growled toward the conclusion. Not realizing until after he spoke out loud, he glanced fearfully at his cousin, who had just returned to work, in response to Karasu's response. You are, the abbot said. Yet what I meant is that I keep tabs on where a Biju is and who is the Jinchuriki for it if there is one. Besides, you're the only one I meddle with, and that's just because you're my cute and adorable grandson who just got his ass handed to him in war. Naruto exclaimed, what, as he glanced down and saw that he was down to just one card, a 2. The monk said, take this, tossing down his own card and matching the 2 that Naruto had played according to the odds. Still win by attrition. The boy leaned back in his chair and sighed. Gramps, are you really my Gramps? Casting a bewildered glance at the boy, Karasu looked at Jado, who shrugged. Anko placed the book on her lap and watched in confusion. What gave you that idea? Well, Jado. Nissan said that you adopted him and most likely adopted Mom as well. The monk said, to be honest, Kushina wasn't my child. I adopted you as my own grandson the moment that you became parentless. How did you handle that one? Inquired the kunoichi, bending forward. I was passing through when the attack happened, and I really didn't want to leave you here on your own after your folks passed away. I was originally planning on spiriting you away and leaving you somewhere else, but after seeing your cute and adorable self, I just couldn't resist. Why? The monk shrugged and said, oh, I don't know, I guess that I've always had a soft spot for orphans. Look at this idiot here. He's a very similar case, to Jodao's laughter. I'm guessing that idiot told you about quite a bit about my past. Just your comparatively non-existent romantic life, Jado replied. Seriously, you old bird, you should have settled down a long time ago. And you should have as well, I'm a widower. Anyway, Naruto, that doesn't mean that I am not your grandfather. You're his father, Anko cut him off. The elderly monk said, if you want to put it that way, with a sheepish expression. But with my advanced age, I really am more of a grandfather. At last, Naruto said, did you really know my mom? I knew her by reputation only and from what I've learned from Jiraiya-san. If you really want to learn more about her, he is who you should ask the next time he visits. He is your godfather after all. Trying to figure out what was going on, Anko asked, if he is the kid's godfather, then why do you have him and not him? He is a very busy man, despite his habits. His duties normally keep him away from the village for extended periods of time. Is that the same Jiraiya who wrote that book? Inquired Jado as she was preparing dinner. As she went back to reading, Anko replied, the very same dirty old man. Jado said, well, dinner is ready, as he started to serve the food. Anko placed the book back on the shelf as Karasu and Naruto cleared the table. The kunoichi looked at the food, wondering, what is it this time? And couldn't help but notice the ground beef in strange shells. Karasu mumbled, licking his lips, oh divine lord, is that what I think it is? As he sat down with the tray, Jado said, if you mean tacos then yes. The old man saw it there and grabbed 2, which disappeared into his mouth right away. Damn, I forgot how much you liked them. The monk grabbed for another bite, saying, are you kidding boy, I still remember my first bite, but Anko and Jado slapped him back. Anko snarled and took one for herself, saying, save some for us, old man. The corn shell crunched in her mouth as she bit into it. She had to concede that the ground beef tasted good as she savored it. So Naruto, did Kakashi tell you the big news? As the boy said, yeah, he nominated us for the Chunin selection exams. Karasu spat food all over Jado, who had just sat down. Something wrong, Gramps? The kunoichi patted the boy on the shoulder and laughed, he's just worried about you. I remember when I took it, he did the exact same thing. What's the matter with you? Jado questioned while using a towel to remove the beef from his face. It's just an exam? Karasu responded, It's just not an exam, while taking a swig of his sake. It's a war game where lives are on the line. It's a mock war, yes, Anko added with joy. Where the stakes are high. Does this pertain to the Cold War going on between the nations right now? Karasu's response surprised Naruto because he had been under the same impression as Jado. To keep it relatively cold, the nations hold a gathering once every 6 months where they pit genin against each other. It is a test, but if you don't pass a part of it, both the genin and his team won't advance. The genin that make it to the final round are on display for the lords and nobles of the nations. The better a genin performs, the more likely they'll become a chunin, but they will also bring more honor and prestige to the village that they hail from. He then massaged his temple. Why oh why did that man nominate you? Naruto took another bite of his taco and said, he said that it'll be a good experience for us, drawing comparisons to ramen. It should be a good learning experience for us Gramps. Anko encouraged her, saying, it really is, old man, before returning to her food. It was an eye-opener and helps show how well you compare to those outside of the village. Jado sat back down and shot Karasu a shady glance. I guess that you can only go so far when you compare yourself against the same people over and over again, he said. Anyway, it's not like Kakashi.Han is sending him in empty-handed. I may not know the kid very well, but if I'm to go by my own experience with you, is that the kid is no slouch from what I can tell by his shikuho. He just gained his 3rd ring this morning. I moved to take another taco, and I know, the monk said. It's just that I worry at times and feel that these exams are foolish. Though they do their job of maintaining stability for now in the nations. I wish it was a real war though, Jado muttered, surprising the 2 younger occupants with his growing strength. Would be much more fun with 2 or more forces clashing and testing to see whose ideals are stronger. For a while, there was silence in the apartment. The only sounds emanated from Jado and Karasu as they consumed their dinner. Anko finally said, you are a weird bastard, after giving the man a startled look. Even though she had never actually been in a war, she knew that the day would come when she would have to go to war, even though she loved a good fight and taking out her targets. She felt a little empty when she thought about that and about her lonely apartment next door. The only people who would probably be waiting for her are Karasu and, if he isn't sent off as well, maybe Naruto. Jado leaned on the table and gave Anko a wry smile, pointing a finger at her. He started to say, you just never experienced war like I have. Anko.Han. It can either be a most glorious contest of strength and ideals, but then he became serious. Or it can be just senseless butchery if the fighting no longer involves the fighting forces. That is when war becomes truly horrible. The only ones who should be cut down are those who are prepared to cut others down. So you really fought in wars before? Yay, I have, and I loved most of them. I always hated it when a war becomes genocide. It is not how wars should be fought. You make it sound like samurai should be the only ones to fight. No, ninjas have their places as well, it's just that they have to be used uniquely. Though in these lands, ninjas make up the mainstay of most armies so it's fine. Karasu mumbled, and there you go on about wars again, as he finished his meal and took a long sip of sake. I don't know how the hell you ever began to romanticize war but you did not get that from me. Blame my boss if you're to blame anyone. Anko looked over at Jado and said, you told me yesterday that you lost your eyes in a battle. Was it true and how many battles have you fought in? Karasu watched uninterestedly as Anko and Naruto gazed expectantly at the man. Jado looked at Karasu, who nodded, and said, well, I still have my eyes. I'm sure that Gramps told you about the illusion already, am I right? I have an illusion over them, of course. He waved his hand over them, causing them to change to resemble Naruto's before changing again to resemble Anko's before turning brown. What you see is what they used to look like. Why the illusion? Well, back in the old days, people with eyes like mine were greatly feared in another land far away. Back where I grew up with Gramps, of course. We were killed and ended up as just a myth before both me and another appeared. Though I was the more dynamic of the two and we had no idea of the other until the fall of the ruling government of the land who was responsible for the genocide. You basked yourself in illusions in order to protect yourself. The man gave a nod. Then is what you're having Naruto do the same thing to his own. Well, it has started though, he said, glancing at his cousin. He has the right stuff so they will change. Is it harmful? No, it's not harmful at all. Remember this morning when I was talking about the rings on the shikuho? The 2 registered ninjas nodded. It's just like the 5 rings, but when they fully change, it'll signify him as a master of the style. Is there any harm to my health from this style? Inquired the boy. Just this morning I saw a kitsune after having a dream with it there. Like I said this morning, he won't be bothering, and no, it's not harmful unless you hate hard work. Then can I see your eyes? No, you'll just have to wait. The man shook his head. We may be family, but we just met and I might have jump-started your training in the style. It doesn't mean that I'm just going to show you everything. Part of the fun is the journey. You don't want to be spoon-fed like a baby now, do you? With a fierce shake of his head, Naruto said, but I don't want them to be hideous. My wife found them beautiful, and so did quite a few people. Others, they were scared of the reputation of those who had them. No, they weren't terrible. They just feared how powerful they were. It shouldn't matter here though. This is an entirely different land and it's more or less considered a lost art that you shouldn't have any problems. He will, Anko said in response. After noticing that Karasu agreed with Jado, despite his surprise at how his cousin knew about it, Naruto nodded and said, "Ah, the Jinchuriki thing, but that shouldn't matter at all. Just don't worry about it, kid, you'll be just fine." Anko growled, squinting his eyes, "And how do you know that?" "I knew the moment I saw him," the man said, clearly unaffected by the kunoichi. It seemed to appease both of the ninja in the apartment. "He isn't the first Jinchuriki that I met, that is reserved for Pimiko-sama. Now, regarding the quantity of fights," Anko replied with a sly smile and a sidelong glance at his bookcase. Karasu asked his youngest grandson, Naruto, "Anyway, what is Kakashi-san's plan for the coming week to prepare you and your team?" When the elderly monk saw the scroll that his grandson had given him, his complexion turned pale. "He gave you this?" The kid nodded. "Yay, though he wants us to train on our own for the rest of the week before the exams. He gave each of us a set of instructions to work on. Even though we won't really improve all that much, but it's better than nothing. Kakashi-sensei doesn't expect me to master this anytime soon, but felt I should add something to my list." Jado said, "The Rasengan looks like a neat trick. Though if I were you, Naruto, I wouldn't only practice that. I would make sure that I was fully prepared for the exam." In response to a question about what his teammates were doing, the boy nodded and said, "Of course, Kakashi-sensei has both Sakura and Sasuke working on preparing themselves as well. I was just lucky with the only one getting a jutsu. Sasuke's forms are full of holes, so Kakashi-sensei wants him working on that, and he has Sakura working on his physical fitness." "It should be alright then," said Karasu as he stood up. "Well, Naruto, it's time to go. You have a long day ahead of yourself tomorrow." Soon the others were standing as well. Jado said, "Yeah, if you need any help, just stop by," as he approached the door. Anko, who was ruffling Naruto's hair, apologized that she couldn't help the child. "I'm going to be very busy over the next couple of weeks." After saying their goodbyes, Karasu and Naruto departed, with only a faint jingle from their shikuhos as they entered the stairwell from the hallway. "Would you like me to take a look at your seal tonight?" Jado asked as Anko turned to leave. She shook her head and said, "Not tonight." She followed him out the door. She opened her own door and leaned against his doorframe, staring at him. "I may have learned a lot about you over the last few days, but knowing that you've been using illusions for most of your life, it's hard to be trusting." Shaking his head, he said, "You can trust that I will remove that seal for you. I'm just going to need a look at it to finish my hypothesis about it. I can only do so much from the notes." Then he turned to leave. "Have a good night, Anko-han. I'll see y'all later." Anko muttered, "Yay, see y'all later," as she walked into her lone apartment. She didn't particularly like the man, but having him as a neighbor will be interesting nonetheless. At least they get along well in the building. Thoughts of the day's events and the upcoming week occupied her thoughts as she undressed and changed into her pajamas. Jado, in the apartment next door, took a can of beer and settled in to read his new book, deciding to put off doing the dishes for later. With a mumble, peace and quiet, Jado opened the book. "Well, this job will be interesting, Dradao?" His response was a growl from his bedroom. "I hear you, old friend." As Naruto strolled through Konoha's streets wearing a hat to shield his bright blue eyes from the bright morning sun, he thought to himself, "Today's the day." With every step he took toward the renowned Shunin selection exams, which were being held at the feared Konohagakure no Sato Ninja Academy, his 3-ring shikuho rang louder. He held a balloon in his other hand, and if one looked closely enough, they would see the barely contained power inside. He felt fantastic, and with a jutsu like that, developed by the Yondaime Hokage himself, his training went more quickly than he had anticipated. Although he was quite skilled at controlling and manipulating chakras, each step was somewhat difficult. Instead of going to Kakashi when he was stuck, he went to Jado because he appeared to be quite intelligent, especially considering how he solved the problem with just a cursory glance at the scroll. Naturally, his cousin did nothing more than point out his errors and offer some helpful advice, but he still enjoyed spending time with his apparently indolent relative. He may be employed by Pervy Monk, based on the information he has about his cousin, who devoted a significant amount of time to reading or taking notes. However, the boy was not a fool. He was aware that the older man was painstakingly figuring out how to assist Anko Ni-chan with her seal. He simply wished they had spent a little more time together outside of his apartment or the temple. The boy grinned and thought, last night was a blast, recalling the competition he and his cousin had participated in the night before. It's unbelievable that Jado Nissan nearly outate me when it came to ramen. He was so shocked when the balloon burst in his face that he fell backwards. He murmured, "Man, this is hard," and reached into his gray cassode to retrieve a fresh balloon. He refilled it with air and started the exercise anew. "I still can't get it right," he said as his mood suddenly darkened by the realization. He's been having dreams about that weird kitsune every night. He's been practicing that strange fighting style with his grandfather and cousin for an odd reason, and he feels like he's getting stronger or more attuned to something. He always felt strong, powerful, and right when he adopted a position. The stances could only be described in that way. He remembers being thoroughly defeated in each of the few sparring matches he had with his cousin. It was as though a fragment of himself was gradually returning to its former state. If one thing was certain, it was that before his cousin gave him that scroll, the kitsune had never appeared before him. Or did it? Naruto wondered, flashing back to his early years in that first stance. Despite what his family told him, he knew that the kitsune was here and now, and it was following him. He can't really recall what happened after that. It has to be a kitsune of all things to be bothering me. How come they are so quiet when I'm Kyuubi no Yoko's Jinchuriki? They ought to be as concerned as I am. The idea was so annoying that he and the person next to him were both knocked down when a hand touched his shoulder and the balloon burst again. "Damn it, Naruto," Sakura muttered, supporting herself with her arms. What the hell was that? Before supporting his teammate, Naruto laughed a little and said, "Sorry Sakura, I was lost in thought when you shocked me." "Okay, but what was that?" The kunoichi looked at the young monk and said, "Part of the training required for the jutsu that Kakashi Sensei gave me." A delicate pink brow rose on her face. "So how did your training go, Sakura?" She looked up at the monk again after turning her head to look away from him and said, "It was all right. I don't think that I got a lot out of it." He smiled and nodded, asking, "You do a lot of exercises, right, Naruto? How can you do it all?" With a quick glance up and a slight backward tilt, he scratched the back of his head. "Well, Gramps is a bit of a taskmaster when it came to chores and turned those into exercises when I was younger. That was after we began more formal training. After a while it began second nature, but it just comes down to disciplining yourself to do it. Anyway, it takes a lot of work and effort to get stronger, but along the way you really don't notice it." Gazing back at Sakura and seeing her green orbs, he went on. "Gramps taught me that physical strength and mental strength aren't what makes someone strong. It's their will. According to him, all living things have it. It's that will that allows us to be who we are and be who we want to be. It's the same for everything in the world. So I can get stronger if I have a strong will?" the kunoichi inquired, hoping that would be the case. "Although you might not be as strong as Sasuke-kun, Naruto, you are still far stronger than me despite your odd behavior at times." Naruto cut him off, saying, "You should believe in yourself a bit more. You are strong too. Do you recall our most recent group training session?" "Let's get going or we'll be late," the voice said, glancing at Naruto and Sakura as he joined them with his customary air of superiority. "What are you two doing standing around?" the familiar voice asked. "Let's get going or we'll be late." Sakura took that as her cue and left to follow Sasuke, though she did give Naruto one last look to urge him to follow. Sasuke complied as he joined them. Leading the way up the stairs to the second floor, Naruto saw a group of genin gathered around a door for room 201. He was not sure why, but he did notice the commotion and saw that two older genin had knocked down a girl in a pink top and a boy in a green bodysuit. He wasn't sure why they were gathered or blocking the door, but he had the feeling that they must have received the wrong instructions. We're supposed to go to room 301, not 201, he thought as he continued to walk past the group, the ringing of his shikuho catching a few eyes that he ignored. Regretfully, he halted upon hearing Sasuke's order. While you're at it, you should drop the genjutsu you've created and let me through. I work on the 3rd floor for my business. Naruto turned around and observed the scene with a look of what could be described as exaggerated confusion. At that moment, the young monk could only properly form the word, "eh." Sakura, who was standing next to Sasuke, also appeared perplexed at the Uchiha, and Naruto thought to himself, what is the bastard talking about? Oh, so you worked it out, huh? The bully who didn't have a gun strapped to his back grinned at the Uchiha. It was easy, right, Sakura? Sasuke shot Sakura a sidelong glance and smiled back. You're the most analytical and the best on our team at understanding genjutsu. Much better at it than me or Naruto. As the Uchiha finished, he directed it right at the monk who just gained more attention. He didn't even notice it. His unexpected praise diverted some attention away from himself and onto the pink-haired Kunoichi. She grinned and blushed at the unexpected compliment, saying, of course I noticed it, of course, we're still on the 2nd floor. Naruto panicked inside, thinking, oh no you didn't, you bastard. The Uchiha just painted them as targets. Of course the boy made Naruto look foolish for not seeing a genjutsu that was in glance. Which he did, and still understand what it was about, but he did know that Sasuke just gave up an advantage to those in the hallway. He was sure Sakura knew this as well, but with the well-played praised from her crush, it allowed her to go along with it as well. Naruto may not be much of a ninja with being a monk as well, but with some reinforced by both Anko and Jado, he knew that you should never give away what are your strengths. It hurt, but he knew that if you revealed your plans, you would lose. Jado had told him the night before that deception is the key to war. It is essential to all the arts of war. It can provide you with the one advantage you need to survive. Without that advantage, you will undoubtedly perish. The man continued, I may not know much about this exam you're taking, but from what I hear, people have lost their lives over a stupid promotion. It's a sorry excuse for war. To survive, exercise caution and give yourself as many advantages as you can. The boy was moved by those words and became enraged at what the Uchiha was doing. He wanted to confront the fool and throw him against a wall because he wanted to make his grandfather proud, and passing the exams was the first step toward achieving that goal. Just as Naruto was about to stomp up to his friend, one of the two bullies charged at him, and the friend returned fire with a kick of his own. Then, before Naruto could stomp up to his friend, a green blur shot between the two boys and caught their legs. The monk, feeling his anger ebbing, thought, he's fast. He's almost as fast as me. He's completely different from before. His disapproval expanded upon seeing a familiar face as he joined his teammates. Hey, Neji exclaimed. Why are you bringing us up when you were the one who suggested it? Even though Naruto didn't like the cousin of his best friend, he had empathy for the distant Hyuga because he, too, had a teammate who needed to draw attention and give away an advantage. Though Naruto couldn't quite make out what the girl muttered, he could only surmise that this was a common occurrence. But, the boy in green clothing began to say, glancing towards Sakura. Hi, my name is Rock Lee. Are you Sakura? I take it? A blonde brow appeared on Naruto's face as he realized that the boy was aware of Sakura's identity thanks to Sasuke's revelation. Hey, he may have painted us as targets, but he made the two of us more of a target than him. No one knows his name, Naruto realized at that moment. Lee gave Sakura a dazzling smile and a thumbs up, then asked, would you like to go out with me? I'll protect you with me life? Lee was a little disappointed by the rejection, but Naruto sensed that Lee wouldn't give up easily despite being rejected this time. No way, she deadpanned. You're lame. Neji said, hey you, grabbing Sasuke's interest, what's your name? Sasuke gave the Hyuga a cool smirk and said, it's common courtesy to give your own name first. The Uchiha then made the decision to leave the event, Sakura trailing closely behind him. The other genin chose to move on, realizing that the show, including the genjutsu, was over. Naruto was about to join his teammates when Neji called out, Naruto. Peering over his shoulder, he saw that the kunoichi with the pink top was right behind Neji. He turned to face the older boy and said, Neji, once more. What a delightful teammate destiny bestowed upon you, Neji remarked, abruptly passing the monk. Apart from his wish to hurt Hinata, Naruto's brow was twitching in frustration because he felt that Neji's belief in fate was the one thing he truly disliked about him. The Kunoichi on Neji's team apologized, grinning in embarrassment. It's his fault. The girl seemed a little taken aback by Naruto's statement, been that way for years, but she dismissed it, saying, he really needs to get over that fate bullshit. Anyhow, you're Naruto and me? Hello. Naruto, I'm glad to meet you. Please excuse me while I go check on my team to make sure they're not doing anything foolish, she grinned. Tenten, she said. After that, she departed on her own, pausing briefly to acknowledge Lee's absence. Is this building bigger than what it seems to be from the outside? Naruto wondered to himself as he joined his teammates a short while later in a lobby with stairs leading to the third floor. Sakura asked Sasuke, who was standing next to her by the wall, Naruto, where were you? Sasuke just gave him a short look and a grunt before going back to his brooding. I apologize, I was speaking with Hinata. Chan's cousin, he said, but Sakura appeared perplexed and Sasuke displayed his lack of interest. The Hyuga that Sasuke was speaking with, Neji, is Hinata. Chan's cousin, he added. Pushing himself off the wall, Sasuke said, well, now that you're here, let's get going. He started to move in the direction of the stairs. When someone called out to Team Kakashi from the third floor balcony, Sasuke, to be exact, they stopped. Hey, you with the dark look, wait up. They looked up and saw it was Lee. What is it? Will you battle me right now? Sasuke asked. You want to fight me right now? Naruto could tell that Sasuke was eager to fight, despite his confusion. Yes. My name is Rock Lee, the boy said as he leapt over the banister and landed in the lobby. You introduce yourself before you ask someone else their name. Is Uchiha Sasuke correct? If the monk had to guess, Naruto saw that Sasuke's eyes narrowed onto Lee as he assumed a fighting stance from the Goken style of fighting, saying, so you knew who I was all along. I'd like to battle you. Though slightly flushed, Lee took it in stride, saying, you're an angel. I want to test my techniques against the offspring of the genius ninja clan, the Uchiha. He then turned his attention to Sakura and winked. Said Kunoichi was startled by his eyebrows and made her opinion of him known to everyone. She sidestepped the kiss that the green boy then blew at her. It showed that she's not as weak as she thought herself to be, and Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at how quickly she dodged that. Sasuke stepped toward Lee and said, you're a fool for challenging me if you already know who I am. Do you really want to find out what it's like to face a Uchiha? Without a doubt, the older boy responded. With a quick glance, he quickly assessed Lee, and with a sigh, Naruto said, Sasuke, don't get your ass handed to you too badly. Naruto then took a place against the wall, feeling the confused looks, the angry glare from Sasuke, and the confusion that the other two were giving him. Sakura joined him, giving him the same confused look that Naruto knew his teammate wanted. Finally, as the two genin squared off, she said, Naruto, I know that you don't like Sasuke much, but why do you doubt that Sasuke-kun? Because he can really pick them, I'll say this, Sasuke-kun, Lee started, standing erect. I am the strongest fighter among all of Konoha's genin. It appeared to be little better than what it was the previous week to both Sakura and Naruto, but the Uchiha said, this could be fun, taking his own stand. I accept your challenge. Sakura exclaimed, go Sasuke-kun, as Sasuke lunged toward Lee. The Uchiha barely ducked under Lee's leg as it flew over his head, only to meet Lee's foot. Lee tried to block it, but it got past his defense, and Sasuke was knocked back away from him. Lee then blurred and appeared in the air with a leg poised to strike. Konoha Senpu, Lee shouted as his leg flew over Sasuke's head. He's like me, Naruto said as he watched the fight, it's just as if he was fighting me, though I don't think Sasuke believes it. Sakura's eyes widened as she watched the exchange and realized what had just happened. Seems like he just used his dujutsu. Naruto's solemn tone sealed Sakura's fate. She realized that Sasuke would not be able to defeat Lee without using his ninjutsu, but doing so inside the building would be disastrous. Burning the building down right before the exams started would be a bad idea. My moves are neither genjutsu nor ninjutsu, Lee declared before he appeared beneath the soaring boy. They are taijutsu, which was the next thing both teammates noticed. Lee then kicked Sasuke beneath the chin, sending the Uchiha flying into the air. The bandages on Lee's hands started to come off. Your strength comes from your lineage, while mine comes from blood, sweat, and tears. Hard as it may be for you to accept, if your Sharingan can see yet you cannot keep up, you cannot win. From the beginning, we were not a good fit. This next action far outperforms your brilliance. Though his mind went in a different direction, how the hell can he maintain that monologue up there and Sasuke not do anything? Oh wait, he was stunned. But still, some hang time there. Naruto's eyes widened from the ground as he watched the bandages about to wrap around Sasuke and knew exactly what move Lee was about to perform. Stop! Yelled a voice, causing a pinwheel to pierce through a bandage and breaking Lee's maneuver. Lee felt the sudden pull and fell into a crouch, while Sasuke was thrown to the ground. Fortunately for him, Sakura quickly rushed to save him. While Naruto was watching Sasuke, she noticed a large turtle with a Hite.8 hanging from its neck. Lee attempted to mumble in fear, "Forgive me, I was only," and Naruto could see that he was trembling. Could this be his Jonin? "Sensei? I wasn't planning on finishing it," Lee said. "You idiot, you think I give a damn about your weak justifications? You already know what happens to a ninja who divulges their secrets," yelled the turtle. "I'm hoping you've got everything ready. So, Guy.san, he's entirely yours." A man wearing a green bodysuit akin to Lee's appeared and struck a pose as smoke burst on top of the turtle, saying, "Ah, the flames of youth. You're all so full of it." His sudden appearance, demeanor, and looks freaked out Naruto and his teammates. "Lee, come here." Guy jumped off of the turtle's shell and beckoned Lee. Once the boy joined him, he punched him. "You idiot." Seeing that Lee was flat on the ground, Guy crouched down next to him. "Lee, you." "Guy. Sensei, I. Lee uttered as tears started to well up in both of their eyes. "That's enough, Lee," Guy yelled, throwing his arms around his student who gave it back. This only made Team Kakashi more frightened, as a cliff and a sunset with crashing waves materialized behind them. The genjutsu was so strong that even Naruto saw it coming. "I know it's because you're young," Guy said. "Lee, don't worry. Making mistakes is a natural part of growing up." "You're too kind, Guy." "Sensei," Guy and Lee said while standing together. "But since you tried to disobey the rule, I can't let you off the hook. Your penalty won't be applied until after the exams are finished." Lee saluted Guy and said, "Yes, sir." Once the initial shock subsided, Naruto noticed that Guy was staring at him and his allies. "By the way, how is Kakashi?" "Sensei?" Guy inquired, giving Naruto and his group his full attention. When the shock finally subsided, Sasuke asked, slowly gathering himself again, "You know Kakashi, Sensei? Are we acquainted?" "I should say so, because the man vanished before Naruto's eyes in the blink of an eye. We are, after all, eternal rivals." Guy was behind them without any of them realizing it. Naruto turned around and thought, "He's almost as fast as Gramps and Wanichan." Guy said, "The score is 50-49. I'm stronger than he is. Nevertheless, when you see him, tell him I said hello. I wish you all the best of luck and may the fires of youth lead you." As soon as the smoke cleared, the turtle and he vanished together with the explosion of smoke surrounding them. "I was lying before. Sasuke.kun. I'm really here to test my abilities and see how they stand against others," Lee exclaimed, amazing, as he started to wrap the bandages around his hands. Naruto noticed how battered the older boy's hands were and nodded to himself, realizing he was right about him from the beginning. "I plan to defeat the strongest Konoha genin that is on my team. Be ready, Sasuke.kun. Just so you know, you're also on my list now." Lee abruptly leapt to the balcony and vanished. "So it looks like I was right," the monk said as he started to move towards the stairs. "Lee was right, you were both mismatched." Naruto turned to face Sasuke after Lee had left, seeing the furious look on his face and his fist clenched. "I think we would have made a better pair. Perhaps this will act as a prompt for you to control your ego." He looked over his shoulder and sensed his teammates' annoyance and exasperation. "Come on, it's almost time." Naruto heard Sasuke say, "Next time he's dead," as he started to climb the stairs. "You'll need to put more effort in your training than he does." Without having to turn around, Naruto noticed that both of his teammates had finally started to climb the stairs behind him. Hey, things are starting to get interesting. The three genin of Team Kakashi arrived at room 301 in no time at all. "Yo, glad that you all made it," Kakashi exclaimed, stepping in front of the door and allowing the three of them to take the exam. Sakura inquired, perplexed as to why they were all required to be there, What do you mean? The Jonin stood up to join his students and started to explain the way that the test is set up. That it can only be taken by 3-man teams of genin. However, you mentioned that it was our decision to accept it or not, a perplexed Naruto added. The man scratched the back of his head, a smile visible beneath his mask. Yes, well, I didn't want any of you pressuring any of the other into taking it. This just shows that you're all willing to take it and that you weren't pressured. If your heart wasn't in it, you wouldn't be at your peak performance. I would not have let any of you through if there was only one missing. So how did your training go? I'm very proud of you all, he said, crouching down and holding his hand close to his face to block out any onlookers, even though there weren't any in the hallway. Sakura admitted, embarrassed by her own development, I did all right, but Kakashi was still pleased. Naruto declared with pride, I'm on the 3rd part of training now, Kakashi. Sensei, as Sasuke moaned. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, the Jonin remarked, grinning. Way to go, all of you are coming along just nicely. He then put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and ruffled Sakura's hair, much to the Kunoichi's dismay as she liked to keep her hair tidy. Now get in there and show what Team Kakashi is made of, he said. Having said that, Kakashi moved aside to let the genin pass through the double doors. Once beyond the threshold, each member of Team Kakashi faced hundreds of genin from all over the world. It was disconcerting to have so many eyes on them. So many people, Naruto muttered, surveying the large room. He no longer thought the school to be what it seemed from the outside. As he and his teammates moved further into the room, his eyes picked up both Neji and Sabaku no Gaara. If there was one person in particular that he was wary of, it would be him. His grandfather had given him a brief overview of the Jinchuriki, but it was mostly based on the few observations he had made of both him and the previous Jinchuriki of the Ichibi no Shukaku. Suddenly, Sasuke grunted and Naruto heard a flurry of activity. Sasuke, where have you been, honey? I could hardly wait seeing you again after all this time, said Ino, a classmate who had taken a shine to Sasuke as he turned to face the Uchiha. Sakura barked, Ino.pig, get your claws off of Sasuke.kun, upon realizing her rival was all over Sasuke. The young monk sighed. This was to be expected, and he chose to step aside and away from the disturbance. It follows that Shikamaru and Choji were also present if Ino was. Despite the fact that they were in the same class, he never really felt a connection with any of them. Well, maybe Shikamaru and Choji more than Ino. A very familiar voice called out to the group, and Naruto froze. Hey, there you are, yelled a boy with a dog on his head and a feral appearance. Naruto turned to look at the source and saw that it was Kiba. Even though he was disappointed to see the Inuzuka, he was relieved to see his best friend at last after a long absence. With a wave, he bid Hinata farewell to the group and watched as she approached Naruto. It's been far too long since they've had the opportunity to spend some quality time together, he grinned. Since they graduated, their only interactions have been in passing. Hello. Naruto.kun. Hinata said shyly, her cheeks slightly flushed. As soon as he opened his mouth to say, Hey Hinata-chan, how have you been? He saw Kiba give him a scowl, which baffled him as to why the boy would do that. She pressed her 2 index fingers together and said, I've been good, how about you? He told her about his cousin's awesomeness and weirdness, saying, Great, I finally got to meet my cousin. He was so focused on his declaration, he even helped me prepare for these exams. I just know that we're going to kick so much ass Hinata-chan, that he nearly missed the fact that the other rookie genin had gathered around an older silver-haired genin. What's going on? He heard Sasuke ask the strange genin, do you have information on Rock Lee of Konoha and Sabaku no Gaara of Suna? Hinata saw that he had turned his attention elsewhere and followed his gaze. As he shuffled a deck of cards, the genin remarked, Let's see here. First up, Rock Lee, he's from last year's batch of genin. He's completed 20D ranked and 11C ranked missions to date. It also says that he's a student of Maida Gai, where his own taijutsu flourished. He's a first-timer at the exams along with his teammates, Hyuga Neji and Kuno Tenten. The genin then chose another card. Next is Gaara. Nothing much about him aside from his mission performance and age, which is the same as you guys. He's completed 8C ranked and 1B rank. Wow, to be a genin and given a B rank mission. Sorry about the lack of information, but it's because he's from another village, but it does say that he's returned from every mission without a scratch. Naruto was very interested in that set of information. He wasn't particularly surprised by the information about Gaara. Rather, what surprised him was the dearth of information. The silver-haired Konoha genin knew more about a fellow ninja than an adversary. It was strange to think that the man would concentrate more on foreign ninja than domestic if he had information. Kiba shot a glance at the monk and asked, "Now how about Uzumaki Naruto?" With a frown, Naruto pondered, "What is this about?" "Yes, without a doubt," the genin nodded. No one was more shocked than Sakura and Sasuke when they said, "Let's see here, got it." Interesting. Monk in training who is also a ninja. His sensei is Hitaki Kakashi, a student of Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage. Also says that he's completed about 16D ranked and 1C ranked mission with his teammates, Haruno Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke. "Hey, isn't that you too? Are you an idiot for asking for information on your friends who are standing next to you?" "Naruto isn't a friend," Kiba said, frowning as he cast a sidelong glance at Naruto. The genin went on, "Well then, his taijutsu is very high, along with his chakra control, though his ninjutsu is very weak. He shows some aptitude in genjutsus where he just shrugs them off without notice. It also says that his grandfather, Karasu no Kami, is a very high-ranking member of the order." Naruto was shocked by the information the genin possessed before, but now that he knows more, he is even more shocked. How the hell does he know that? He asked himself in a low voice. He doesn't talk about order stuff at all unless it's in private between me and him along with Pervy Monk, and they both know when someone is listening in when they do talk. In a quiet voice, Hinata said, "I don't know Naruto-kun," casting a sidelong glance at the monk. "That is some very private information. He shouldn't have been able to get that." Naruto muttered, "Yeah," noticing some shocked looks from his former classmates. "I should ask him where he got that because that last bit not even Hokage. Gigi knows." Hinata stumbled out, "Naruto-kun, don't," as she grabbed his arm. "If you do you might get in trouble." He pivoted to confront her, raising his hat to allow her a close-up view of his eyes. He tried to appease his best friend, Hinata-chan, who was starting to act like a fish when she looked at him, saying, "I'll be fine." "Is something wrong, Hinata-chan?" she said, waking up from her daze. Your eyes look different, Naruto-kun." "My eyes," he said to himself, then realized. How do they look different? Naruto groaned, liking the way his eyes appeared, but now they appear to be changing. It looks like they are turning purple around the edge of your irises." He pondered how his cousin managed the adjustments as a result of possessing the necessary items. Now, at that comment, Naruto raised a blonde brow, and his best friend started to mumble an apology. "They look really nice, Naruto-kun." The Hyuga heiress then inquired as to whether it was similar to her dujutsu. "Geez, Hinata-chan, no need to apologize. I'm going through some new training that my cousin introduced me to, so this was bound to happen. Though I would like to know how my eyes will look in the end." From what Jado Nissan said, it's more of a mark of mastery than a dujutsu. Sakura's gasp startled the two of them, but they were too engrossed in their chat to notice anything else. Glancing toward their fellow students, they saw the back end of an attack that the more experienced genin quickly sidestepped. His glasses broke and he fell to his knees, retching, even though he managed to avoid the strange gauntlet that the bandaged genin was using to attack him. Naruto tried to figure out how the older genin was hurt by the attack, thinking he dodged it. Reviewing the events, he recalled that the assailant used his arm covered in gauntlets to attack. There must be a trick with that gauntlet. The boy with the spiky hair, who was standing next to the bandaged face, said, "You should put this on your cards. The 3 auto nins will definitely become chunins during this exam." Before anyone could say anything more, the front of the room erupted in smoke. A big man in a black trench coat said, "Will you all just shut up?" as the smoke started to disappear. Numerous other Konoha ninjas were gathered around him. "Sorry to have kept you waiting. My name is Morino Ibiki, and I am the examiner for the first part of the exam. You kids from Otogakure, you can't do what you want when the exam is about to start, or do you want to be thrown out of here?" The bandaged-faced ninja apologized, "Sir, it's our first exam and we got a little carried away." All of the people in the room understood, but some, particularly the auto nins, laughed at Ibiki's remarks. "Is that so? Then it's time for me to lay down the ground rules. From this point on, there will be no more fighting without the express permission of the lead examiner, and even if that permission is granted, anything that ensangers another applicant's life is forbidden. Any of you little brats who break that rule are out. No second chances. Got that? The first part of the exam is about to begin. Turn in your applications and take a number for the seat that you will be assigned. You are to report directly to the seat given to you. When everyone's seated, we'll pass out the written part of the test. What the hell? Yelled Naruto, shocked. He thought to himself, there's no way in hell that I actually studied for this, as he and Hinata approached, turned in their applications, and were given their seat numbers. Why, oh why, does the test have to be on paper? So, do the lords despise me? Let's do our best, Naruto-kun, Hinata remarked, surprising him by sitting next to him. Yay, let's do this, he replied with a feeble smile, leaning his shakuho against the desk and letting his hat dangle off the back of his neck. Ibiki called out, kid, drawing the attention of everyone in the room, including Naruto. The older man was pointing at him, and they noticed. What the hell is that on your head? What are you talking about? Sakura exclaimed. Ew, what the hell is that, Naruto? As she also saw what was on Naruto's head. The monk asked repeatedly, what the hell are you guys talking about? As he observed the mixture of confused and disgusted looks directed at him. Naruto-kun, Hinata uttered in hushes. You have slime-kun on your head. When he finally realized what was happening, he reached up and took slime by the top of his head. The blue creature simply grinned at him and said, so that's where you've been, slime. I was wondering where you've been. It's just slime. He's a friend of mine. Not quite trusting the little creature, Ibiki asked, does this have anything to do with Karasu? Sama? Naturally, Naruto can relate to him and the other people in the room because he has never seen or heard of a creature like this before. Yeah, sorry about that, when he's on me, I don't notice him at all. It's like he isn't there. If I knew he was here, I would have left him home. Returning his focus to the other attendees, Ibiki said, regardless, he's with you now for the duration of the Chunin selection exam. The man took up a piece of chalk and started writing on the board, saying, there are a few big rules that pertain to this first test. I'll write them down on the board here and explain them as I go. Though I will only say them once. The first rule is that each of you starts out with 10 points and each of the 10 questions on the test is worth 1 point. For each question you get wrong, we subtract a point from you. Get all 10 right and you keep your points. Now for the second rule, this test is a test taken as a team. Passing or failing will be determined by the sum of the points held by all 3 members of each team. The object is for each to have as few deductions as possible from its joint 30-point total. Placing slime back on top of his head, Naruto listened as the small creature shifted and looked around the room. Naruto started to sense the enraged looks that Sakura and Sasuke were giving him as he was explaining the rules. Panic struck again, and he thought, oh man, I am so screwed. The third rule is if during the course of the exam, a candidate who does anything out of the ordinary, in other words anything that will lead us examiners to believe that you are cheating, we will subtract 2 points from each member of the cheaters team. In all probability, some of you will run out of your allowance of points during the test. If so, you have failed and will be asked to leave, Ibiki continued as his assistants distributed the pencils and tests. If you let us catch you cheating, you'll be cheating yourself and letting your friends down. If you aspire to become Chunin, if you want to be the best ninja you can be, then you'd better start acting like one. Also, if one person loses all 10 points, they have failed along with their team. The monk thought to himself, now this really sucks, and stiffened. Though he was never one to be intimidated by Sakura or Sasuke, he can sense it now, particularly since he is, for once, the team's weakest member. Everyone in the room started frantically taking the test after it was announced, you will have 1 hour to take the test. Just so you know, the 10th question will be given out once 45 minutes have passed. This was the first test in the Chunin selection exams. Naruto couldn't help but become more anxious than he had been before he looked over the test. As he reviewed the first question, he thought, decode the cipher and summarize its meaning. How dare we? We've never talked about that. Most of these questions are too difficult. Most of this, I'm pretty sure we never discussed, particularly the part about figuring out which enemy is moving and when the shuriken is flying into it. Display your efforts on that one? I can't understand it, but Sakura might. The message is, be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness, a voice said to him. He couldn't place it, even though it sounded familiar. He looked up, trying to find the source, and saw Slime grinning down at him. Naruto wasn't sure, but he was fairly certain that Slime's lips remained motionless, so he wasn't going to question his blessings just yet. It means you can direct your opponent's fate. They want you to cheat and we shall help you, Naruto-chan. Naruto muttered, "Thank you, Slime," as he continued to get more information. With plenty of time remaining, he completed his test, turned it over, and took out a fresh balloon. After filling it up, he started the exercise for the last jutsu step. If one ignored the scribbling and the occasional outburst from a failed genin, the room was fairly quiet. Now that his test was over, Naruto was content and determined to make his family proud. He had also returned to work on the jutsu that his sensei had given him. As the instructions stated that this step could be completed while walking, he had no idea how someone could manage to copy it. He was one of the first to finish, so he was observed by a few genin and examiners. The examiners were particularly interested in him because he was holding a balloon and they were expecting him to use it to cheat in some way. Naruto was blind to the slight smile that Hinata gave him or the looks of relief on his teammates' faces. Other genin saw him as a prime target, but it was difficult to accept any of his responses because he had turned in his paper and was no longer observing other people's behavior, unless they had some sort of dojutsu that would have allowed them to see through the test. Ibiki suddenly called out, "All right, time for the 10th question," drawing everyone's attention. Naruto's attention was truly captured by the statement, "Before I give it out, there is one more rule you must know. This rule is absolute." His anxiety started to creep back in. If you decide to take it, and you fail to answer it correctly, you will lose all of your points and lose any chance at participating in any future Chunin selection exams. If you refuse to take it, you can pack up now and try again in 6 months. What the hell? Kiba yelled from where he stood in the space. There are ninja here who've taken the exams more than once. Ibiki laughed. It's just your rotten luck, kid. I wasn't making the rules in the past. I am now. You can walk out now and be fine, or take it and risk your future. Then, Naruto's balloon burst, sending him flying backward and colliding with the desk behind him in the process. The tests of those around him blew away, but before anyone could move, the examiners snatched them up and put them back in their proper places. Naruto-kun, Hinata exclaimed, turning to face the monk. The boy, touched, waved her worry away and sat back down. I'm okay, he replied. Now that's over with. Who wishes to leave now? Ibiki asked him, glancing at him dryly. A few hands shot up, and Naruto began to consider giving up as well. His grandfather would undoubtedly be disappointed if he couldn't answer the question. That was the very last thing he desired to do. The idea of disappointing his grandfather hurt him because he loves him so much. Again, Slime whispered in his ear, wouldn't he be more upset with you if you give up without trying? His hand began to rise, but Naruto stopped before it could rise all the way. He slammed his hand down on the desk and said, Never underestimate me. I won't run away from this question. I will be a person that my grandfather will be proud of. He glared at Ibiki again, slime on his head. I'll accept the stupid question even if I risk my chances at a promotion. I'll still be able to hold my head up as I stand by him. I'm not afraid of you, so bring it on. Ibiki looked at Naruto and asked, Are you sure you want to take it? Naruto nodded in response. The man nodded to an assistant examiner after surveying the room as if to see who else was still there. How unfortunate for you. You've all just passed the first test. Naruto was among the many genin in the room who were taken aback. Sakura questioned, What do you mean that we passed? And Naruto could tell that Sakura was at a loss for words. When did that happen? What about the 10th question? The older man's scarred face broke into a smile that didn't look quite right. That was the 10th question. Naruto turned to face another genin, a blonde girl from Suna, and asked, Then why did you have us answer all of the other questions then? Was that just a total waste of our time? They fulfilled their objective by assessing your capacity to obtain data, the man clarified, sounding entirely different from earlier. To Naruto, he appeared much more subdued now. Everyone had to come to the conclusion that they had to cheat in order to stay alive in the scenario given. Of course, anyone who cheated in clumsy or obvious ways failed. Ibiki then started to undo his bandana and become solemn, which affected the entire room. The rules were designed to induce fear into each and every one of you. The questions given were meant to be ways above your given abilities to answer as well. He revealed to everyone the terrible scars covering his head after the bandana was taken off. There will be circumstances where you being caught may cost you more than your life. The information you obtain can't be trusted if you can't keep yourself concealed from the enemy. His headband returned to covering him. Know this well, there will be times when information will matter more than your life, because it can affect the fate of entire countries. Sakura wanted to know why she asked the 10th question, so she said, "Okay, but what about the 10th? Well, it's pretty simple when you think about it. You're given the choice where the chances of you dying are very high. Do you take it or pass it over to someone else so that they can attempt at it? The answer is no, because in the face of adversity, you must maintain a strong will to see you through despite the gamble that you're taking. Those who don't take risks aren't worth becoming Chunin at all. I wish you all good luck on the next test." Before two kunai shot out of the dark object and embedded themselves in the ceiling, revealing someone Naruto knew well, the object crashed through one of the room's windows. The moment he saw her, he grinned. As the sign behind her read, "I am the head examiner for the second test, Mitarashi Anko exclaimed. Now is not the time for celebrating. She was so eager to leave that she scowled when she noticed how few genin were still present, but she was happy that Naruto was among them. Time's a wasting people, let's go, she exclaimed. Ibiki, you passed 20.6 teams. Did you go easy on them? Nope, this year has some interesting people. Yes, exactly, she said, but from the way she looked at him, Naruto could tell that she was happy with his development. He was pleased that he had pleased her. He thought, well, I'll just have to cut that number down by half then, aren't I? But as soon as he saw the sinister look on Enko's face, he started to perspire. I'll explain the details to the next test once we reach the area where we'll be taking it. Naruto thought, oh hell, and tensed up. That was an expression he recognized and didn't like to see. He glanced at Enko, who was striding past him, and got up from his seat, telling him to follow. Repositioning his hat atop his head and seizing his shikuho, he trailed behind her, Hinata by her side. The other genin in the room left the building after them. He turned to go outside and saw another familiar face grinning at him. Ni-san, the boy thought to himself, feeling a surge of pride. Naruto was about to approach his cousin when Enko came up to him and they had a private conversation, during which she touched her neck on the right side. The Jonin concluded her private conversation once all of the genin who passed the first test were outside in the yard, saying, all right you brats, you better keep up or you'll regret it. Let's go. The group exclaimed as they started the arduous journey to the next exam. With barely concealed excitement, Naruto muttered, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to show them just how awesome I am. Sakura said, hey Naruto, momentarily cutting the excited boy off. Do you know them? The examiner gave you a few looks while that man just seemed to look at only you. The monk looked at Anko and Jado, who resumed their private conversation, and nodded excitedly. Yeah, I've known Anko Wanichan for years, and Jado. Nissan is my cousin. So your cousin is an assistant examiner? Sakura inquired, glancing at the two leading the group. It was likely, but Naruto knew that there was more to it than that and that Anko's situation was very private. He shook his head, saying, I don't know, it's likely but I doubt it. He's probably just tagging along with Anko Wanichan to see how the exams are. Hinata, who was blushing slightly, said softly, he seems nice, Naruto-kun, staring at her best friend. Yeah, he's pretty cool, but weird. Sakura made the decision to pose yet another query, so Naruto, what were you doing during the test? The rookies all looked at that, especially Sasuke, who said, just practicing the jutsu that Kakashi Sensei gave me. He wouldn't tell them what it was when they asked. He wanted to tell Hinata, but he was afraid that with so many people in the room, they would somehow turn the knowledge of the jutsu against him. He'll just tell her after they've had some time to get away from everyone, especially Sasuke and Kiba. The topics of discussion quickly shifted to the group's activities following their full-fledged initiation into Konohagakure and some of their adventures. Kiba had started scowling at Naruto whenever he went nearer to Hinata during these exchanges. Naruto didn't know why the Inuzuka was acting that way, so he had to assume it was just the boy's general distaste for Naruto. After some time, the monk started to recognize the landscape as the trees grew bigger and more aged. Anko yelled over the crowd, welcome to Training Ground 44, as she stood in front of a gated forest. When Naruto noticed the older Kunoichi smirking at the group of genin, he couldn't help but smile too. Otherwise known as the Forest of Death, This place will be the field where you will take the second test. A little way off to one side, he could see his house and his grandfather was standing there, silently observing them. He waved to Karasu, who waved back. He knew his grandfather had warned him not to get too cocky, but he couldn't help but feel his pride grow even more than it had before. His family was present, observing him while he was being tested. Sakura murmured, "This place looks pretty creepy," which he heard. He turned to face his teammate and reassured her by putting a hand on her shoulder. She turned to face him, and he fixed his gaze on the far-off temple. She felt somewhat relieved by the action, realizing that he had some knowledge of the area. Kiba questioned, "What's so special about this stupid forest?" Akamaru agreed, growling, "Trying to scare us with that load of crap. We're not kids, we're ninja lady." Anko said, "You're pretty cocky, aren't you, kid?" with a smile that made Naruto and his cousin uncomfortable. Her smile was so subtle that none of the genin in attendance realized anything was amiss until she vanished from view. She materialized behind him, her arms wrapped around him, licking the blood dripping from a gash on his face, saying, "Your kind are always the ones that are the first to go. Spilling all that red blood that I love." It happened rather quickly, but Akusa Kunoichi suddenly materialized behind her, a kunai tucked into her long tongue. Anko was about to stab the unfortunate genin with a kunai during the action, but the genin didn't flinch. "Your kunai," she declared, extending it to the jonin. "I think you dropped it." It was dropped, thrown, and the object that cut Kiba's trembling face was the one. The jonin took back the kunai and said, "Why thank you," glancing at the genin behind her. "Just so you know, don't sneak up behind me radiating bloodlust unless you want to die." The Kusa Kunoichi pivoted and strolled towards her group. "Sorry, I'll try to keep it down, but the sight of blood gets me crazy and I couldn't help it when I lost a strand of my hair just now." "I apologize for that," Anko remarked slyly. Naruto thought, "Geez, that was intense." Although he and his cousin were used to Anko's antics, he felt a little uneasy seeing her prepared to act in such a dramatic manner. Even though Anko is hilarious and silly, he occasionally forgets that she is a skilled Konoha jonin. What's wrong with that Kunoichi? His tongue is so long. "With all these bloodthirsty ones here, this should be a fun test," Anko remarked, taking a pack of paper out of her coat. "Now before we start, there's something that I have to hand out. These are consent forms that everyone has to sign." "Why?" inquired a Konoha.nin from behind. She continued to smile and said, "Well, there will be a few deaths in this test," to which Jado scowled. Evidently unimpressed with the idea of possibly losing his life to advance in rank, Naruto was aware that his cousin had made no secret of his disapproval of the exams ever since he started preparing for them on his own. The majority of the genin present shuddered, "And I don't want to be held responsible for your deaths and have people coming after me wanting to avenge you and then have others wanting to avenge them. As nice and bloody as they will be, it'll be tedious having to clean up every time. Remember those bothersome lawsuits?" Jado continued, earning him a scowl from Anko. "Hey, I'm just saying that they can be really annoying. Those lawyers can be just as, if not more bloodthirsty than ninjas." After saying, "True, but let's get back to me explaining," the jonin gave Jado the papers. "Do you mind handing these out? Thanks. Before you sign, let me explain the test before you submit your forms at the booth behind me along with your teammates. To keep this simple, this test is the ultimate survival test. But with a twist of capture the flag added into it. In the massive area of this forest, you will be fighting each other over the possession of these two scrolls, the Scroll of Heaven and the Scroll of Earth. Both of the scrolls were marked as such. There are 20.6 teams present, so the Scroll of Heaven will be given to half of you, and the Scroll of Earth to the other half. To enter the tower in the middle of the forest, you must have the entire set." When the genin in attendance realized what she had said to Ibiki earlier, a few of them gasped. She paused for a moment to observe the looks of the genin around her. Most were nervous or uninterested, but Naruto was completely at ease with being here. Now once you enter the forest, there is no turning back. You will be there for a total of 5 days. Don't worry too much surviving in there. Well, you should when it is filled with cute nasty creatures that may or may not want to have you as a snack. Though enemies all around you, they may not be your main concern. Since it's his backyard, he is familiar with how to conduct himself there. Now let's talk about what will fail you in the exam. First, if you fail to reach the tower with both scrolls within the time limit. Second, if any team lose a teammate or they die, you fail. Also, under no circumstances are you allowed to leave the forest before the time is up. So you're locked in there until I let you out. One more thing, you are not to look inside the scrolls at all. As Chunin, you will be asked to carry sensitive information and will be trusted by your superiors to handle them. So consider this as a test run for when you're promoted. She then put both scrolls in her pockets. She started to move toward the booth with Jado by her side, saying, "Now then, we'll be giving you one random scroll per team. So get those signed now so we can get underway. Oh, one more thing. Stay alive if you want to see your homes again." Following the explanations, the group dispersed and went to their designated areas within the area, each with their own team. Sasuke muttered, "They're pretty smart with keeping us in the dark," glancing at the booth, which was now covered so that the examiners couldn't see them. Naruto nodded and stated, "Yeah, everyone is an enemy." Even though he was feeling very proud of himself, the consent form he was holding felt very heavy. That little piece of paper was what held his life together. He had never experienced such anxiety before. Yes, he did, indeed, put his life in danger during that once-in a lifetime trip to Wave Country. As the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, he has experience dealing with spirits and demons, so he is capable of handling this. He can succeed because his family has faith in him. So he signed the waiver without thinking twice. Both of his teammates signed following his lead. They approached the booth, signed their forms, and traded the waivers in for a scroll of heaven. Anko and Jado stayed behind as the teams started to follow the examiner after receiving their scrolls. Naruto noticed the two were staring at him with pride as he turned to walk away. He waved back to them, grinning, and then he joined his team. Naruto's temple was eventually passed by Team Kakashi as they were led to their starting gate. After receiving a nod from his grandfather, he smiled back. He will pass this test with flying colors, meaning he will get to see his grandfather once more. He will not fail it. "Hi Naruto, is that your grandfather?" Sakura inquired, observing the aged monk in the understated yet exquisite temple. All she got in response was a nod from him. It was not long before they arrived at their gate, where they had to wait a little longer for the examiner who was monitoring his watch to turn around and open the gate. He said, "Okay guys, good luck, and let them through the gate." The examiner shut the gate and locked it again as soon as any of the genin passed through the threshold. Jado sat next to Anko on top of the booth back at the starting point and inquired, "Is it still hurting?" During the test, they were both waiting for something to happen while eating lunch. Anko, on the other hand, was only a tag along. She made to touch her seal and nodded. She was aware that he had witnessed her touch there several times today. Her seal started to hurt, and she wasn't sure what it might mean, so for the first time in a week, she made the decision to let him look at it. He went through the notes in his apartment, and she gave him a good look at it. He even let her read one of his books. The book that the kunoichi picked was one he had recently purchased a few days before this visit. The man had a few theories, but nothing seriously wrong, and he didn't share them with her because he thought she shouldn't be concerned about them. But after that, he made the decision to follow her for the day. She initially objected, but she eventually agreed when he explained that, since this was the first time, it would be ideal if he was close by. Nevertheless, Anko had to concede that the man was helpful when she asked him to assist with a few things, such as her entrance at the conclusion of the first test and the distribution of the waivers. As she waved her wrist to release the last skewer, Anko remarked, "Well, we should probably head to the tower." Jado turned to face her target and saw that she had made the Konoha ninja symbol on the tree, which they all wear. Suddenly an examiner stood in front of the two of them and said, "The good ones should be done in less than a day." This man looked at Jado for a moment inquiringly, then returned his focus to Anko. "What is it?" According to Mizuku's memory, the man said, "Anko. Sama, there is trouble with anxiety. 3 dead bodies have been found by the stone Buddhas. There is also something very weird about them. Please come see for yourself." She glanced at Jado, who gave her a nod. Leaping from the booth, they both followed the examiner back to the location of the bodies. As they arrived, a spiky haired examiner, whose name, if she recalls correctly, was Katetsu, said, "They look like ninja from Kusagakure no Sato that were taking part in the exams, based on their belongings, papers, and identifications." Anko was standing over a body that she recognized. Jado knelt beside the body and said, "Hey Anko.Han, isn't this the girl who you almost gutted?" She didn't know how he could tell that it was the kunoichi because the girl's face and her teammates had vanished. "Very interesting," she said. staring down at the body with dread as she realized what had caused the damage to their faces and who had killed them. Anko turned to face the 3 examiners and gave the order, "You 3, report to Hokage." Sama immediately and asked for 2 squads of Anbu to be deployed in the forest. "I'm going in after the imposter right away." With that, she launched herself into action. "What the hell are you doing?" As they raced toward the forest, Jado said, "You know who did this," and he joined her. She winced, but he didn't look at her. "If I had to guess, I'd have to say that it was the bastard who gave you that seal. His presence might explain why it's acting up, and meeting him might give me insight into the seal." When they eventually arrived at the fence, she exclaimed, "Are you crazy?" Both leapt over it with ease, their coats flapping in the air behind them as they carried on running into the forest. At last, he turned to face her and said, "I should be asking you the same, Enko-han," his expression so serious that it nearly made her trip. She had never seen him look so serious in all the time she had known him, but she assumed that was just the nature of the moment. Going in to take him on when your seal is acting up. It's most likely a liability if you were to face off against him. Don't worry about me though, I can handle myself just fine. This is far from the first fight I've fought. Same for me, she shot back, grinning at him in return. Following that, they both carried on running and jumping through the forest in search of their intended victim. Naruto sighed as he and his companions strolled through the forest. It had only been a few moments since a few aim.nin ambushed them in an attempt to take advantage of him breaking away from the group. While one of them attempted to get a place with both Sakura and Sasuke, the other 2 attempted to remove him. Luckily for them, Sasuke saw through the ruse right away and chased the ninja away. The monk thought, maybe I should talk to both Gramps and Ni-san about changing up my style, after being literally caught with his pants down by Naruto. Even though the monk defeated both ninjas and took their scroll of heaven, that moment made him humble. I can't let that happen again. He was not happy with the group password that Sasuke had chosen because it was complicated and lengthy. Yes, he could still recall mantras and prayers, but those were not poems. Sasuke halted and held out his hand to the monk, demanding, "Naruto, give me the scroll." Bewildered, Naruto followed the instructions, reasoning that since dividing the scrolls would make more sense, he might as well. It's not like he disclosed to his teammates that he had an extra. Deceit is important, and you can fool your enemies as well as your allies. Good, now let's. Before Sasuke could finish, Sakura and he were both blown away by a strong gust of wind. Naruto was also caught in it, but unlike his teammates, he was blown off and simply collapsed face first. He was looking around to try and figure out what had happened, and he saw the kunoichi that Anko had nearly killed in the distance before she vanished. He assumed a fighting stance and prepared his shikuho as soon as she did. His gaze darting between the foliage and the trees, he nearly missed the huge shadow that appeared out of nowhere to cover him. When he looked up, he saw the largest snake he had ever seen. It was the size of the Hokage Tower. He cried out, "Aw shit," as he avoided the snake's lunge and it collided with the earth. The boy yelled, "You don't belong in this forest," to the snake as it attempted to snatch him by the tail. It failed and attempted another lunge, receiving the same outcome. It lunged again, but this time the monk leapt high into the air and spun around, slamming his shikuho into the large snake's head. As the snake smashed into the forest floor, the rings on his staff rang out loud and clear, "Begone, foul creature." Landing on its head, Naruto used his shikuho to strike it one last time, severing its skull and killing it. After concluding a prayer for the soul's departure, Naruto turned to face the sound of a scream. "Be at peace in the world beyond." That sounded like Sakura. Running toward the source, which was high in the trees, Naruto noticed his 2 teammates staring off at the kusa.nin inside the snake corpse from a branch beneath him. He had no idea how that had happened, but they both appeared incredibly afraid. When Naruto noticed that the kusa.nin was about to slither up to a higher branch to attack his teammates, he leapt down to the branch and destroyed it with ease with his shikuho. The poor branch had no chance against such a vicious blow. Nevertheless, the kunoichi refrained from striking as Naruto went by her. Gazing up at the enemy from a lower branch, he thought to himself, "Probably the rings gave me away." Excitement at his forceful entrance, he heard Sakura exclaim, "That was awesome, Naruto." Even though it wasn't his intention, he had to admit that it was pretty cool. Unfortunately, the circumstances prevented him from thinking about it. He heard Sasuke yell again, "Naruto, I know that you think you're all cool now thinking that you're going to save us, and it irritated him. Really, he wasn't trying to look cool. He was just there to assist and save his teammates. But forget it. This guy is on a whole other level. Gazing down at him from the branch, the Kusa.nin laughed and said, Naruto.kun, well done on taking down my snake. The monk thought, he looks like a snake too from how he's all twisted around that branch, but then something clicked. How on earth did he know my name? Naruto didn't know why, but he could only assume that trouble was ahead. He made the decision to join his teammates in a higher branch. Why don't you try me on instead of them? With a loud no, Sasuke withdrew the scroll of heaven he was holding. If it's our scroll that you want, just take it and go. Startled by Sasuke's actions, Naruto exclaimed, what the hell do you think you're doing? He would never have guessed Sasuke would do this in all of their time together. Even Sakura, if he heard that gasp of hers. Naruto gave the Uchiha a hard slug just as he was about to throw it. What the hell are you thinking, coward? There is no chance that he'll just leave us alone even if we give him a scroll. The Kusa.nin laughed, oh this is rich, as she stood on both legs, revealing a tattoo by pulling up one sleeve. Her thumb was bit, and blood was spread across the tattoo, saying, Naruto.kun is right. Why bargain when I can just kill you and take the scroll? When Naruto saw this, he raised his Shikuho and charged the Kunoichi. He heard Sasuke telling him to stop, but he disregarded him, losing all faith in the Uchiha's, at best, questionable abilities. He had lost whatever little respect he had for him. The first examiner had informed them just before that being a Chunin meant having a strong will to get through times like this one. Even though the others think Sasuke is strong, they are only able to see what they want to, not the fearful weak will of Genin, who gave in to fear at the first sign of trouble. Naruto, his fellow teammate, exclaimed. When she started to doubt herself, he would reassure her because he knew that she had faith in him, just as he has faith in her. It was undeniable that even with her crush on Sasuke and her occasional rudeness, Naruto doesn't want to see her suffer at the hands of this powerful enemy. She said, Kuchio's no jutsu, as he got closer to the Kunoichi, and a much bigger snake than the previous one materialized under her feet in a puff of smoke. With a flick of its tail, it charged at the boy. Naruto was stunned by the skillful display and was unable to avoid the blow. He flew through the air and crashed into a branch high above, breaking his hat with the force of the hit. It's Sasuke. Kun's turn now. Sasuke was never in danger of being approached by the massive because Naruto suddenly crashed into it. The monk exclaimed, Heaven's thunder, as his Shikuho collided with the snake's head, trapping all of his weight and setting off a loud ringing sound. The snake slammed into the earth and then vanished exactly as it had appeared. The Kusa.nin looked at him with a smile and said, what an interesting technique, Naruto.kun, as they faced each other on the spot where the snake had once been. However, she said, her fist buried in his stomach as she faced him. Naruto was hit so hard by the attack that he lost all of his breath. The Kunoichi's fist was the only thing keeping him awake at that particular moment. He sank to his knees, retching, as the Kusa.nin pulled back her fist, saying, you may prove to be too troublesome. The boy tried to stand up, thinking to himself, damn it, get up. Get up, Gramps hits harder than him. I'm not going to give up on this, I'll make Gramps proud. His opponent said, oh you still have some fight left in you Naruto.kun, as he slowly stood up and used his Shikuho. She took a step toward him and said, I think I should just end this now. However, she stopped when the boy assumed a fighting stance that she had never seen before. His vision grew blurry, it hurt to breathe, and he couldn't shake the feeling that a wave of strength was rising inside of him. Over the course of the last week, he had grown more accustomed to the power, even though he was unable to define it. This gave him some comfort. He deflected the blow that his opponent threw at him. He would duck when she lunged at him. He would use his Shikuho to block any kicks she attempted. Even though he knew he was running out of time and that his vision was getting worse, he couldn't stop when his life was in danger. There, he thought as he spotted a gap and seized it. His Shikuho flew at his opponent's stomach, making time seem to slow down. His opponent exploded in a shower of gore as his Shikuho shook from the raw chakra he poured into it, ready to explode upon impact. Regretfully, that was the moment when the abuse he endured finally caused his body to fail. He fell face first into the dirt, his Shikuho tightly clutched in his hand, so dazed from the fight that he failed to notice the sudden blow to his neck. Sakura was terrified beyond belief. But Sasuke's helplessness to defend himself was what truly alarmed her, not the strange Kusa.nin. He was frozen in fear, and she had always thought of him as the strong, silent boy who would face any kind of adversity head-on. Although the young Kunoichi couldn't really hold him responsible for it, it was a setback for her crush because he left Naruto to face the more experienced Kunoichi by himself. She would have participated, but she was aware that doing so would have made her a distraction and that she lacked the ranged skills necessary to support the monk. She and Naruto both understood that she wouldn't be much use to either of her teammates if they had to cut loose until she developed and acquired new abilities. She could, however, still assist Sasuke in a fight, unless she wanted to find herself in the path of one of his ninjutsu strikes. She retreated during fights when her team needed to be really serious for that reason. Regretfully, she could not bring Sasuke back into the battle until it was too late, and even then, the Kunoichi dismembered him and left an odd scar on his neck. She knelt beside her crush and cried, "What did you do to Sasuke-kun?" as she flinched at the ninja who had defeated them. The Kusa.nin, who had assumed the identity of Orochimaru prior to biting Sasuke, said, "It's just a little something to remember me by," as she vanished into the tree. Sakura looked around nervously, waiting for the Kunoichi to reappear, but she was startled out of her caution when Sasuke started to cry out in excruciating pain and eventually passed out. She cried, "Hang on Sasuke," as she made an attempt to cling to him. She was barely able to make out Naruto's prone form as she peered over the edge of the branch. "What should I do?" she asked, her eyes welling up with tears as panic set in. She was genuinely clueless about what to do. It was impossible for Sakura to carry them both, even though she knew that she had to find somewhere to sleep. There was just no way she could carry Naruto, no matter how hard she tried. She let out a last gasp when she saw the enormous, powerful red tiger towering over the boy, and looked down at the monk. It appeared to be sniffing the boy before using its mouth to carry him off somewhere. All that was left were his broken hat and shakuho. She had never felt so powerless as she did now. It was genuinely hopeless. She was unable to assist any of her teammates, particularly the one who was attempting to shield her from Sasuke. She would never be able to protect Sasuke and save him from that tiger at this point. She was forced to leave him, even though it went against the first lesson Kakashi had given them. She quickly came to the conclusion that Naruto's sacrifice would not go unnoticed. She would not let Sasuke die, she would see to it that he did too. If it was her last act, she would visit his house after they emerged from the forest and attempt to mend her relationship with his grandfather. Thus, she flipped her crush onto her back and dove to the forest floor to gather Naruto's belongings. She bent to pick up the hat, knowing his grandfather would be happy to have it, and inside she saw Slime grinning at her. She covered her head with the hat, ignoring the creature as she reached for the three-ringed shakuho. Lifting the staff up felt strange at first because it felt so heavy, but then it felt as light as a feather in her hands. Upon more scrutiny, she discovered that the shakuho contained just one ring. It was peculiar, but she didn't give it any thought since it belonged to Naruto and maybe his grandfather had given it to him. She couldn't resist holding it closer to her as she took one last look at it. The old, worn metal showed signs of use, and she couldn't begin to guess how many memories it held. Therefore, she reluctantly put the Uchiha back on her back and started to jump out of the clearing while carrying the only things that Uzumaki Naruto had left behind. She tried, but tears would not stop streaming down her cheeks as she made her way through the trees. She had recently lost someone she could truly consider a friend, even though the monk was strange. This was far worse for her than the time she discovered Sasuke covered in senbon needles on the bridge because, this time, Naruto was actually gone and there was nothing she could have done to stop the tiger that had carried him off to eat. She muttered, "I'm sorry, Naruto," as she started looking for a secure location to call home and start taking care of the Uchiha.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.